Hello, this is Dr. Stanley Lang, and the topic today is chronic stress management and cortisol levels and how that all affects whether you have disease or not. And I'm known as the Whole Health Doc because I approach health and wellness and disease management with a whole person health approach that's health of body, mind, and spirit. So I encourage you to approach your health that way also. So again, we're going to focus on chronic stress, but also looking under the surface at one of the chemical changes that you probably have heard about, which is cortisol. So cortisol is one of the critical hormones that plays probably a bigger role in managing how our bodies work than most hormones. And one of the things about cortisol is that the levels change a lot during the day. We call it having a diurnal variation. And so what this is supposed to represent is that it's kind of peaking right about 5 in the morning, a little bit later for some people, a little bit earlier for others, but then it starts to drop through the day, and about 5 in the afternoon, 4 to 5 in the afternoon, it's hitting one of its lowest levels, and then it starts to go back up again. And then through the night, as we're sleeping, it's actually starting to rise. And then as we hit about 5 in the morning, it's at its peak again. And it's doing that to kind of get us ready for the day, since we're generally not nocturnal animals. And so when we do live a nocturnal life, we really goof this up. Now, what happens with chronic stress is that the cortisol level gets pushed up and stays up. So what happens, you'll see that there's still this diurnal variation, but it's much more blunted. And so I've sort of shown that it's higher to start with and stays high, but it doesn't go up and down as much. Now, because it doesn't go up and down as much, to put it simplistically, that's why a lot of the symptoms that we have from chronic stress happen, because of what's going on with this. Now, in acute stress, the cortisol level goes up and then it goes back down again. But with chronic stress, it just goes up and stays up because it's being stimulated to stay up. And so when you don't see this kind of a more significant fluctuation, you lose a lot of the benefits of what cortisol does for us when it's being pumped out in the setting of acute stress. So in acute stress, when cortisol is pumped out, we have a lot more energy. It releases energy from stored places. It actually decreases our perception of pain. And it does a whole lot of other things that basically makes us able to do a lot more than we normally are doing on a given day. But it's meant to happen for short periods of time. And when it's not for short periods of time and we move into this chronic persistent phase, then all of those benefits go away and they're replaced by big bad things. And so the cortisol elevation that happens affects every significant system in the body. But one of the things that it affects a lot is the thyroid system. So you've probably heard of adrenal fatigue, which is supposedly when the adrenal glands stop making enough cortisol. Actually, what's happening most of the time is that the cortisol levels are actually not low. They're still high, but they're causing a change in the thyroid system. So the thyroid system includes a hormone that is hardly ever measured by most doctors or even specialists called endocrinologists. It's not worked into the system of how they're trained. It's not like they don't know about it. They just don't use it as a management tool. So this is called reverse T3. So what is reverse T3? Well, the active hormone, the active thyroid hormone that's working at your cells, that's making everything work, that's deciding whether the thermostat is set at 50 or 80 in each cell, is called T3. Now, T4 is also a thyroid hormone, but it's converted to T3 right when the body needs it. Reverse T3 is kind of the body's fine-tuned system. It's like an opposite mirror of T3, and it plugs into the same receptors, but it blocks those receptors from T3 activating them. Now, in the way that we're designed by our creator, this allows the body to have fine tuning. So just in case we have a little bit too much T3 floating around, the reverse T3 can be plugged in and sort of block the effect of T3, and so the body can come back into balance again. But under chronic stress, reverse T3 goes up, and it goes up a lot. And so it has a much more significant blocking effect on the T3 receptors, the thyroid receptors on the cells, than it's supposed to. And so we feel hypothyroid. And that's what a lot of people call adrenal fatigue. This is actually what's happening a lot of the time. Now, when doctors measure thyroid hormone levels, this isn't one of the ones they measure. And this doesn't affect the thyroid hormone level called the TSH, which is the main one that doctors sort of check to see, is your thyroid okay? So they'll just check a TSH level. They might check a free T4 level. Neither one of those are affected at all by this. If the reverse T3 is going up, that doesn't make either one of those hormones change. So you'll look normal from a thyroid perspective with most of the tests that are done to check for thyroid dysfunction or underactive thyroid. So a person who has normal T4, normal T3, normal TSH, but a high reverse T3, they will feel hypothyroid. They will feel fatigued and other things. Now, that's only one part of what chronic stress is all about. So it's a lot more complicated than that. I don't want to make it too simplistic, but I want to make a point that the things I'm going to share next are the things that I have measured will lower the reverse T3 level. Lower the reverse T3. Now, we can give a hormone that will lower that reverse T3 level, but that takes a doctor giving you an expensive hormone with lots of expensive monitoring. There are natural ways to lower the reverse T3 level. And some of these you've heard about, some of them you haven't. So I'm going to just kind of review the different things that you can be doing that will naturally reverse reverse T3 elevation. And so the first thing that I tell people to do are a variety of different herbs or natural substances. And so there's 4 big ones that I use a lot. The first one is Rhodiola rosea, which is an ancient herb. It grows in Siberia and also parts of China. And it has a very powerful adaptogenic effect, which decreases the chronic stress response. It blocks the chronic stress response. It blocks the acute stress response even. And so rhodiola is a very safe, it's probably the most studied herb on the face of the earth, because the Russians used it a lot in their space program. So part of how they managed to have people up in space for such long periods of time was because their cosmonauts actually took rhodiola when they were in space. The second thing that is CBD, which comes from hemp, the hemp plant. Now the hemp plant is the same thing genetically as the cannabis plant, but it's been bred in a different direction so that it has very little THC, almost not measurable, but it has a lot of CBD, which is cannabidiol. And CBD has a very powerful stress-reducing effect. The third thing I have listed there is kava, which is an ancient herb that's used in the Pacific Islands. And I recommend kava to patients for anxiety control and stress management. And the problem is that you want to make sure you've got a good source. So I recommend kava that is sourced out of Hawaii so that we have U.S. Monitoring of the actual sourced product rather than stuff that's coming from other places where we don't have any monitoring in place. Not to say that there's not good kava from other places, but I prefer to recommend sources of nutrients when possible that U.S. Monitoring can happen, because I do think we have a higher commitment to quality control than a lot of places in the world. And then the last thing there is maca. Now that is one that's not grown in the United States. It's grown in the Andes at a high elevation, and that's a very powerful stress reducing. It's not really an herb. It's a tuber that is actually a food, but it has a very powerful adaptogenic effect. So these are things that when you take them, they decrease the stress response. Now, what I've measured is when I can naturally decrease the stress response in my patients, that reverse T3 level drops down. Now, what are some other things we can do? Well, there's a lot of lifestyle stuff that's really critical. It's even more critical, perhaps, than these herbs. It's hard to say what's more important, your right leg or your left leg. But all of these lifestyle strategies are really, really helpful for decreasing stress. Number one, exercise, particularly cardiovascular exercise, but stretching exercise also induces a stress reduction effect. Low glycemic eating, really critical. If you're not eating low glycemic, you are causing stress. When you eat high glycemic foods, you trigger a stress response in your brain. The third thing that will help you is to pray. So prayer of all types induces what is called the relaxation response. Now, some types of prayer are much more powerful in inducing the relaxation response. Now, you can induce the relaxation response just by repeating the word one over and over again. Now, that's not going to get you very close to God. I don't recommend it as a strategy, a spiritual strategy. So when you pray, you get the spiritual benefit and the relaxation response. And then the last thing I've got mentioned there, or that I've got listed, as EFT, standing for Emotional Freedom Technique, and Qigong. Both of these have been proven to lower stress, the acute and chronic stress response. And there's a lot of ways why they do that. Now, there's some particular ways that I recommend to do EFT. There's a lot of stuff online that is kind of wrapped up with some weird spirituality. I don't think it's safe. So we've developed a safe EFT approach, and we've also developed a Qigong approach that has a spirituality that I consider to be a lot safer than some of them that I've seen online. The point being, these are very powerful natural strategies that will decrease the stress response powerfully. And I have proven with monitoring in my office that the reverse T3 levels come down as people do follow stress reduction techniques and do a variety of these different things. Now, the last thing that I'm going to mention is a new technology that powerfully reduces the stress, the chronic stress, stressed out feeling. And this is a stem cell activation through a peptide that is called the copper peptide. This is brand new for a lot of people. They've not heard about it. This doesn't mean that you can take copper peptide and make your stem cells get activated, because it doesn't work that way. You have to activate copper peptide through a technology that I'm not going to go into on this, just to say that stem cell activation decreases stress very powerfully. Stem cell injections, not necessarily, but stem cell activation throughout your body will. Now, one of the things that I wanted to have as a sort of a topic about all of this was coronary artery disease, a practical application. This is like the disease of stress. Now, all of the chronic diseases that you know of are worsened or caused by stress, but this is the biggie. This is what kills most people in the United States and in much of the world. And stress plays a huge role in it. Now, in current medicine, stress is not appreciated as a risk factor for coronary artery disease. If you look at the big risk factors for coronary artery disease, you see cholesterol, you see diabetes, you see high blood pressure, you see family history. But stress is actually the biggest of the risk factors. And the reason we know this is because something that's called the Roseto Effect. So what is the Roseto Effect? So it's something you can look up and read about. It's a pretty interesting story. But the long and the short of it is that this Roseto Effect showed that a people living in harmony, in community, and in low stress because of the very tight relationships that they had almost no coronary artery disease. In other words, even though they had a lot of lifestyle issues that they were doing completely wrong, because their lifestyle blocked chronic stress, they didn't have coronary artery disease like the rest of the people around them in other towns. And so that proves that stress reduction can be very powerful antidote for all of the other risk factors that are floating around causing disease in your life. And so all of the things that we've talked about and sort of hinted at during this brief video are things that you can do. Now, we've created an online academy that you can access for 7 days completely free to learn about this stuff. Or you can go out and do your own searching. I've given you the list of the things that work to decrease stress. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out how to do some of these things. Now, some of them you're not going to be able to figure out on your own, I guarantee you, but some of them you can figure out real easily. So if you want to do it on your own, I just gave you the list. Go at it. But if you want some help in a strategy that I've been using for more than 3 decades and helping people to control stress, then click on that link and you'll get some of the Roseto Effect without living in Rosetta. And so I hope you found this helpful, that you understand that chronic stress has a biochemical basis to it, that it makes you feel like you've got an underactive thyroid gland, that it causes all of the chronic diseases, and you can do something about it with a lot of simple natural things without any medicine at all. You don't need to take an anxiety-reducing drug. You don't need to take an antidepressant. You don't need to take any of that stuff that will keep you hooked on it for the rest of your life. Instead, you can get your body into balance with these stress reduction strategies. And if you want some help, I encourage you to join the online academy. It's a good deal at free, and it's still a good deal if you decide to go past the free trial. So please click on the link and take a look. I wish you well, God bless, and have a great day.